Okay, guys, so this is the first lecture on Gilda, which is an incredible film, 1946, directed by Charles Vidor, starring Rita Hayworth as Gilda. It is one of the most sex-drenched and bonkers films I've ever seen. By the way, I don't know if it matters. It probably doesn't. I don't know if it matters, and I don't know if you can even tell. But I am filming these out of order. I did Night of the Hunter was my last one from which you saw weeks ago. But a friend of mine came over and wanted to watch Gilda, and so I took notes during the movie, and I'm filming it way earlier. So I don't know if you can notice or tell, but if there's anything odd about this one, maybe you're expecting, I don't know, a snowstorm in the background or something, given the week. I have no idea. So anyway, out of order. I apologize. So Gilda is a totally fascinating movie. And I mean, all of these, obviously, people say, what are your favorite movies? And you guys will now have seen 14 of my favorite movies in the 14 weeks of this film class. But Gilda is amazing and strange, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Um, it is, I find it somewhat hard to teach Gilda, um, because a lot of the things that make Gilda a great movie, and this is true for movies in general, and it's an aspect of things that is hard to teach, which is that they are ineffable, which means like hard to put into words what makes the movie great. For starters, one of the main things that's happening in Gilda is charisma. Rita Hayworth plays Gilda, um, and she's mesmerizing. She's mesmerizing in every scene that she's in. In fact, she doesn't show up in the movie for like 20 minutes, and the first 20 minutes of this movie are boring. Just because she's not on screen. There's a guy and he's gambling, and he meets another guy who's got a sword and a cane, and that guy's rich. And I just don't care about any of this stuff until she shows up. When she shows up, however, it's completely electrifying. And I hope you'll notice that. And we talked about this with 2001, and we talked about this with Lost Highway. One thing that filmmakers do is they create a pattern and they lull you. So sometimes movies are a little slow on purpose. Why would a movie want to bore the audience? Movies are slow on purpose because it makes it more dramatic when something happens. So I find myself a little bored during the first 20 minutes of Gilda. But when Gilda shows up, it's one of the most electrifying moments in cinema history. That famous scene where she pops up, Gilda, are you decent? Who, me? And it's one of the most famous moments. And watching this with people, I will sit there and just hit rewind 10 times on that scene where she says, "Who, me?" Um, it's an incredibly famous scene. A lot of my students are familiar with The Shawshank Redemption, which is a movie in which Tim Robbins is wrongly put in prison. It's based off of a Stephen King story, and it's one of these movies that used to, or does still, I don't know, but used to play on TV all the time, and it's a good movie, but it's partly because it's on all the time. People love it because it's a movie people have seen. Whereas you won't see, if you're flipping channels, you're not going to find Lost Highway. They don't put that on TV because of movies. Nobody wants to watch that but me. But Shawshank Redemption is very popular with a lot of people because of how frequently it's on television. This is also true, by the way, of the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which is a Christmas movie. It is a great movie, but it became popular because they played it on TV all the time. If you know the Shawshank Redemption, Rita Hayworth figures prominently when they have he's digging a hole out of his prison cell, and he covers it up with a poster of Rita Hayworth, and it takes him so many decades, he changes the poster a couple of times. But when they have a movie night in the prison, they play the movie Gilda. And so a lot of my students are first introduced to Gilda because it's the movie they play in the movie The Shawshank Redemption. And the scene that they show in the movie The Shawshank Redemption is the scene from Gilda that introduces her, the kind of the pop-up, "Who, me?" Um, so it's a movie and it's famous on multiple levels too. Um, Rita Hayworth is famously considered to be like one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood, one of those sort of most beautiful women in the world. She's like Grace Kelly, and you've already seen Grace Kelly in Rear Window, and that's another one of those just like mesmerizing human beings. Um, so Rita Hayworth is really considered to be like one of the most mesmerizing actresses. But in Rita Hayworth's case, similar to Grace Kelly, and Marilyn Monroe also, they didn't like make a ton of films. So when you talk about like the charisma and the power of Rita Hayworth and Marilyn Monroe and Grace Kelly, you're only talking about a handful of films. And for Rita Hayworth, it really is, it's Gilda. I mean, there's other movies, and she was married to Orson Welles, and she was in some things. But like She's in The Lady from Shanghai, which is a cool movie. But like when you talk about Rita Hayworth being the most beautiful woman in the world, what they're really referring to is the movie Gilda. So two things that really make this movie important, but also make it somewhat difficult to talk about because it's one of those moments where, as a teacher, the most I can do is be like, "Look at that! Isn't that awesome?" Or "Look at that! It's beautiful!" Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have a lot of like detailed analysis for you. Um, I mean, I do have a lot of detailed analysis about the story of Gilda, and I will be getting to it. But honestly, everything I'm going to say, and I'm an interesting guy, I got interesting things to say. But what really makes Gilda amazing is that Rita Hayworth radiates charisma. Now, I don't know if you remember in Lost Highway, um, a lot of the characters in Lost Highway seem very flat or dead. They move very slowly, so that when something happens, it's very impressive. Or in Blue Velvet, where the characters seem sort of corny or dorky. Yep, that's an ear. Um, Gee whiz. So that when Dennis Hopper shows up, you're like, oh my God, what's happening? There's something of that here where the other characters, they're all fine, but no one in this movie is as interesting as Rita Hayworth's Gilda. I mean, she's absolutely fascinating. Now, she's fascinating on her own, but she's fascinating because everything she's surrounded with is less fascinating than her. There's no competition. Your eyes are focused on Gilda. Um, as are the eyes of all the characters in the movie. One of the things I want to say kind of briefly, it's just, again, I don't know how to talk about it. So the two things we had to talk about to get started are lighting and charisma. Um, there's a famous book about cinematography, which is sort of, the art of making beautiful images with a motion picture camera. Um, which involves all kinds of things from framing and lighting and all this kind of stuff. It's called painting with light. That is what the director and the lighting director and all the people working on the movie, that's what they're doing with Rita Hayworth. She looks extraordinary in this film. Now, obviously, Rita Hayworth is a very beautiful woman. But I think a lot of people assume that like there are good looking people and there are bad looking people. And if you're good looking, if somebody takes a picture of you, it'll look good. And if you're bad looking, if someone takes a picture of you, it'll look bad. Now, if you've ever done this thing with Instagram where you might take 1,000 photographs but only post one selfie, you may have figured out and if you know cameras, you may have figured out that like the nicer equipment you have, the nicer lighting that you have, makeup, these things can make you look beautiful. Like so that like if a famous photographer wanted to take a picture of me for the New Yorker magazine, I would look fucking great because it's some of the work. Obviously, Rita Hayworth's an extremely beautiful woman, but a lot of the work is being done by the people who are composing these images. What I want you to notice in Gilda when she's on screen, just look at the light on her face. Look at the way her hair, they put light on her hair in such a way that she, many times in the big moments, she appears to have almost like a halo of light around her. Her makeup is flawless, but the lighting, when she can be in deep shadows, but there's these little pinpoints of light in her eyes that make her look mysterious, but very alive and intense, even in the darkness. She's shot in so there it's paint. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's painting with light. So every time you see her, especially when it feels important, just pause the movie and look at what they're doing with the lighting that makes her look so stunning. And again, they're already working with an extremely attractive human being, but they're painting with light at the same time. So it's always worth pausing the film when she is on screen just to see how she's being lit. It's a huge, huge part of what makes the movie go. So that's why you got to pause these things and look. And I know it's annoying to pause a movie because you're supposed to be watching the movie and it's annoying to stop. But stop. If you're going to do movie appreciation, really pay attention to what's going on, pause it and just look at it and think about where all the lights would have to be placed. And notice this is not always going to be realistic. It's not realistic for a person to have lighting setups the way they are in some of those rooms, but it looks amazing. So just this movie, the lighting on her is incredible. When she wears that jacket with the sparkles on it, it looks gems. I mean, it just shimmers and shines. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And again, obviously that garment is gorgeous, but they're also painting with light. It's partly a lighting effect. All right, I'll pick you up in the next video.